The Culinary Expo was a grand affair, spotlights overhead, cameras flashing, and the air thick with the aroma of exotic spices, truffle oils, and seared meats. The country's most renowned chefs gathered under one roof, their white jackets pressed and embroidered with their names, their accolades displayed like badges of honor. Then she stepped in. Rena. She wasn't in uniform. No monogrammed coat, no entourage, no trailing assistants. She wore a simple dress, her hair tied back in a loose bun, and carried a small wooden crate of ingredients, fresh herbs, homemade sauces, and a bundle of vegetables from a local farmer's market. The other chefs barely noticed her. She didn't look like competition. At the tasting counter, a tall, sharp-featured chef named Anton, famous for his brutal critiques and his own too. Michelin stars watched as Rena quietly set up her small station. "What's that?" he asked, loudly, gesturing at her crate. "Are we serving lunch from the village market now?" Laughter bubbled from nearby contestants. Rena simply smiled, saying nothing as she arranged her ingredients. Anton walked over, hands clasped behind his back, and peered over her shoulder. "Whatever you're making, I hope it's not one of those peasant stews. This is a gourmet event, not a countryside picnic." More laughter, but Rena didn't flinch. She stirred her pot gently, letting the aroma of roasted garlic, fresh basil, and slow-simmered broth rise into the air. She wasn't here for their approval. She wasn't here to prove anything. Yet what Anton and everyone else didn't know was that the woman they just mocked didn't just belong here. She was the only chef in the room with 3 Michelin stars, and by the time her dish was served, no one would be laughing. The kitchen floor bustled with activity, chefs flambeing meats, plating delicate desserts with tweezers, and finessing sauces to a glossy perfection. Flashy techniques were on full display, each chef eager to catch the judges' eyes with drama and flair. Meanwhile, Rena stood at her small station, calm and focused. She wasn't using dry ice for theatrics or gold flakes for showmanship. She worked with her hands, coaxing flavors out of the simplest ingredients. A broth slowly thickened, vegetables carefully layered, herbs torn by hand just before garnishing. Anton watched her from across the room, smirking. "Still looks like peasant fare," he muttered to a fellow chef. "Be lucky if the judges even taste it." But something had started to change. The air around Rena's station began to carry a fragrance, so deep and complex that even the busiest chefs paused. Notes of umami, sweet basil, roasted tomatoes, and a whisper of aged Parmesan lingered like a familiar song. Even a couple of the event staff found themselves drifting closer, drawn by the scent. The judges, 3 of the country's most discerning culinary experts, began their rounds. They sampled intricate plates that looked like artwork, dishes so meticulously crafted they could have come from museum displays. Then they reached Rena. One of the judges hesitated, eyeing her rustic, unadorned setup. But when she ladled the dish into a simple ceramic bowl and placed it before them, the aroma alone caused the lead judge to raise his eyebrows. "What is this called?" he asked. Rena smiled. "It's a heritage broth, my grandmother's recipe, with a few quiet additions." They took their first spoonful, and the room changed. Their eyes widened, not just at the flavor, but at the emotion it carried. It was warmth, depth, a complexity hidden within simplicity. The lead judge looked up sharply. "Who taught you to layer flavors like this?" Rena's smile deepened, but before she could answer, someone whispered her name aloud, loud enough for Anton to hear. "That's Rena Desai, the 3-star Michelin chef." The whisper spread like wildfire. Anton's smirk vanished. His face paled, because in that moment, and everyone else realized, the woman he had mocked was culinary royalty, and he had just dismissed a master. The realization rippled through the expo like an electric current. Heads turned, conversations hushed. People who had chuckled at Rena's rustic ingredients now stared in disbelief. The woman standing in a simple dress, her hair loosely tied, was none other than Rena Desai, the elusive chef, whose restaurant had earned the coveted 3 Michelin stars. His name whispered reverently in elite culinary circles. Anton stood frozen near his station, his confidence crumbling. He had ridiculed her in front of peers, treating her like an amateur, oblivious to the fact that she was leagues beyond him in mastery and acclaim. The lead judge, spoon still in hand, spoke with a newfound reverence. "This broth, this is not just cooking. This is storytelling." Another judge chimed in. "Every layer of flavor, it's like you've captured memory in a bowl. Rena smiled gently, her voice humble but assured. That was the point. Sometimes food isn't just about innovation, it's about reminding people of where they come from, of the warmth of home. The judges nodded, savoring every bite, fully aware that what they were tasting wasn't just a recipe, it was heritage elevated by genius. Meanwhile, cameras shifted their focus from the flashy chefs to Rena. Photographers captured her calm presence, journalists scribbled furiously, eager to report how the quietest chef in the room had just stolen the entire show without a hint of arrogance. Anton swallowed his pride. Earlier mockery, now a chain around his neck. He approached Rena, his voice low. I didn't realize who you were. Rena turned to him, her expression kind but steady. That's the thing about kitchens, Chef Anton. You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. Her words hung heavy in the air, because in the world of culinary arts, just as in life, true mastery isn't in the medals, but in humility. And today, the chef with 3 stars reminded them all of that without ever needing to brag. As Rena stepped back to her station, the judges continued their tasting, but the energy in the expo had shifted completely. No longer was the spotlight on the chefs with extravagant techniques, or the ones dazzling with presentation. Tricks, it was now on the simple, unassuming woman who had let her cooking speak for her. Contestants who had ignored her earlier now watched closely. Their pride stung. Some approached cautiously, asking quiet questions about her broth, her method. Hoping to catch a fraction of the mastery she had demonstrated without showmanship, Rena answered them with warmth, never condescending. She shared insights about layering flavors, respecting ingredients, and cooking with patience, lessons passed down from her family, honed in her award-winning kitchen, but rooted in humility. Meanwhile, Anton stood near his station, watching her. Every word she spoke was a lesson he wished he had learned sooner, not just about cooking, but about grace. The lead judge approached Rena one last time, his clipboard tucked under his arm. Miss Desai, you've stunned us today. Your dish wasn't just perfect, it was meaningful. Rena smiled gently. Thank you, but I wasn't here to stun. I just wanted to remind people that food doesn't have to be complicated to be extraordinary. The judge nodded. You've succeeded. News of her quiet triumph spread beyond the expo. Social media buzzed with photos and videos of the humble chef who had eclipsed the entire competition. Headlines praised her for reminding the culinary world that heart mattered just as much as technique. But for Rena, it was never about headlines or trophies. She packed her wooden crate, gathered her tools, and prepared to leave just as quietly as she had arrived. Because to her, the greatest reward wasn't applause. It was the look on someone's face when a simple meal reminded them of home. As the event wound down, Anton approached Rena once again, this time without arrogance, without the bravado that once shielded his insecurities. His voice was lower, almost hesitant. I need to apologize, he said, his gaze steady but humbled. I judged you by your appearance, by the simplicity of your ingredients. I was wrong. Rena looked at him with quiet understanding. Thank you, Chef Anton. It takes courage to admit that. He nodded, grateful for her grace. You've reminded me of something I forgot, that cooking is not just about showing off, but about connection. Rena smiled gently. Exactly. A dish is a conversation with the soul. And sometimes, the simplest ingredients carry the deepest stories. Sincerity of the exchange didn't go unnoticed. Some of the younger chefs nearby listened in, realizing they were witnessing not just an apology, but a transformation. As Rena prepared to leave, the event organizers offered her the spotlight, a formal ceremony, interviews with prestigious publications. But she politely declined the fanfare. I didn't come here to be celebrated, she said softly. I came to remind chefs and myself why we started cooking in the first place. She walked away quietly, leaving behind the aroma of her broth still lingering in the Iran, invisible signature of her presence. But her departure wasn't the end. Anton stood there, reflecting. That night, he returned to his own kitchen, not to create a new menu, but to rediscover the flavors of his childhood, the ones that first made him fall in love with food. And in kitchens across the country, chefs spoke of the woman who had shown up with a basket of vegetables and left with the respect of the entire culinary world, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it with a single, unforgettable dish. Weeks passed, yet the culinary world still buzzed with the story of Rena Desai. Articles hailed her, not just for her Michelin stars, but for her humility, her mastery, and the quiet way she reminded everyone that cooking was, first and foremost, an act of love. Restaurants began to shift not in technique, but in intention. Chefs revisited their roots, embracing simplicity without shame, reconnecting with the joy of feeding hearts, not just impressing critics. Anton, who had once mocked her, transformed the most. In interviews, he openly spoke about the lesson he'd learned. His menus changed not to mimic Rena's style, but to reflect authenticity. And when asked what sparked his change, he'd smile faintly and say, "A humble bowl of broth from the most brilliant chef I ever misjudged." Meanwhile, Rena returned to her small countryside restaurant, marked by neon signs, hidden from the casual tourist. But reservations flooded in from people all over the world, not because of the stars she had earned, because they wanted to taste the soul she poured into her food. One evening, she prepared the same heritage broth. A young apprentice asked her chef, "Do you ever regret not taking the spotlight when they offered?" Rena smiled as she stirred the pot. "No, the spotlight fades, but the taste of a meal made with care that stays." Outside, her restaurant's garden bloomed quietly under the moonlight, just like her legacy, rooted, enduring, beautiful without needing to boast. Because in the end, the greatest chefs aren't remembered for the titles they wear. They're remembered for the flavors they leave behind in the food, in the hearts they touch, and in the lessons that remind us. The simplest dish, made with love, becomes a masterpiece no one ever forgets.